Everyone's gone through that awful experience of sitting through a movie, hating every second of it, and feeling like they've just wasted a few hours of their lives. After enduring such a painful trip to the cinema or film night on your couch, it's not uncommon for one specific question to come to mind too. Did the actors involved also despise being part of such a rotten picture? Well, when it comes to the following stars, the answer is unquestionably a big ol' yep. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 actors who hated their own movies. Number 10, Sylvester Stallone thought Escape Plan 2 Hades was beyond awful. The first Escape Plan saw the action icons that are Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger teaming up to break out of prison. While it wasn't exactly a critically acclaimed hit, fans of the legends clearly had a good time with it, and the prison thriller earned enough at the box office for a sequel to be greenlit. Unfortunately though, that Arnie-less follow-up ended up being quite a disappointment, not just for fans of that first ride, but for the main face of the series himself. As Stallone would reveal in an Instagram post talking about the then incoming Escape Plan 3, The Extractors, he felt Escape Plan 2 was truly the most horribly produced film I have ever had the misfortune to be in. Tell us how you really feel, Sly. And that wasn't the only time Sly made it clear that he absolutely hated the film he had a reduced role in either. When a fan responded to another of his Instagram posts about The Extractors by saying they hoped it was better than the 7% tomato meter flop that came before it, Stallone replied by saying, "Myself too, Escape Plan 2 was beyond awful." Put simply, Sly is not shy about letting the world know that this movie did not go to plan. I've got a quick question for you. What is your favourite guilty pleasure action movie? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 9. 3 of his bad movies make Eddie Murphy cry. The great Eddie Murphy has starred in some of the most beloved films of all time, appearing in everything from Beverly Hills Cop to Shrek to Dr. Dolittle during his 40-plus years in the movie business. However, not all of his work is as adored as those classics, with some even making the man himself shed a tear, and not because they were incredibly moving masterpieces. When promoting his then new film Mr. Church in 2016, a drama designed to leave audiences crying their eyes out, the icon would respond to a question from Yahoo Entertainment about what movies he put on when he was in need of a good cry in the most Eddie Murphy way imaginable. "Pluto Nash, that breaks me down. That breaks me all the way down," he said. "Then I put on Meet Dave, that tears me apart. And then if I really want to cry, I'll put on Imagine That." The actor was joking around here, of course, but it's also clear that these 3 commercial and critical flops are films he doesn't exactly think of fondly. Pluto Nash in particular is a movie he's been quick to poke fun at since it crashed into theaters in 2002, stating, "I know the 2 or 3 people that like this movie," when talking to Barbara Walters. It seems safe to assume that he was not one of them. Number 8. Paul Newman thought The Silver Chalice, his debut, was the worst movie of the 50s. 5 years before he'd earned the first of 10 Oscar nominations, he'd eventually win the Best Actor statue in 1987 for The Color of Money, Paul Newman made his big screen debut in a movie adaptation of Thomas B. Costain's The Silver Chalice. Even though he'd eventually go on to pick up a Golden Globe for New Star of the Year for his work as Basil in that movie, the actor wasn't exactly the biggest fan of the film that Victor Saville had directed. In fact, he went as far as to call it the worst motion picture produced during the 1950s, as seen in the book Paul Newman: A Life. There was even a point there when Newman went out of his way to apologize to people who had seen the movie on a local Los Angeles TV station in 1963. The actor coughed up $1,200 for adverts in the 2 daily newspapers found in the city, with Newman trying to stop people from having to sit through the work he thought was terrible. Instead of listening to his advice though, folks tuned in to see if it was really as bad as he said it was, leading to some pretty good ratings actually. Proving just how much he hated his debut film, Newman also reportedly told his eventual co-star Liev Schreiber 4 decades after he made The Silver Chalice that when they ask you to do The Silver Chalice 2, don't do it. In other words, this chalice left quite the bitter taste in the late star's mouth. Number 7. Jacob Elordi thought his teen heartthrob movies were ridiculous. Before producing strong performances in the likes of Euphoria and Saltburn, Jacob Elordi announced himself as a teen heartthrob in Netflix's The Kissing Booth movie series. They may not have been the greatest teen rom-coms ever to land on the streaming platform, sure, but they were a job and helped turn the Australian into a star. When discussing that trilogy of Kissing Booth films with GQ last year though, it was apparent that Elordi isn't exactly a lover of the popular movies he helped create. Claiming he didn't want to make those films before he made them, he'd go on to describe them as ridiculous before saying they're not universal and they're an escape. He'd also note how the whole one for them, one for me mentality was a trap too, because it can become 15 for them, none for you. You have no original ideas and you're dead inside, so it's a fine dance. Yep, that's how he put it. And his emphatic words of my one for them, I've done it, tell you all you need to know about his feelings towards the films that helped catapult him to superstardom. So don't expect to see bad boy Noah Flynn pop up on your screens again anytime soon, folks. Number 6, Josh Brolin thinks Jonah Hex is a S-word movie. As Paul Newman's hatred of the Silver Chalice showed, there are some movie wounds that even time cannot heal. And the same can be said of Josh Brolin's hate for a little film by the name of Jonah Hex. In the years after making the 2010 superhero western, the star of the picture has never hesitated to let the world know just how bad he felt the whole thing turned out. Back in 2016, Brolin admitted to Nerdist that he hated the disastrous film that eventually had 66 pages reshot over 12 days. He'd also claimed that if he had $5 million to spend on a movie, he'd make one like Clint Eastwood's High Plains Drifter involving the titular bounty hunter. This is actually what Brolin pitched when talking to Warner Brothers about the project. He later criticized the studio for interfering with the movie and also said they made a big mistake with the director when talking to Variety. And as of 2024, Brolin still holds a grudge against arguably the worst film on his CV, telling GQ earlier this year that while he has since reconnected with Jimmy Hayward, and the Hex director apologized for his part in the mess, he won't ever stop S-wording on Jonah Hex because it was a S-word movie. He didn't say S-word. What could have been a compelling addition to Brolin's stacked back catalogue instead turned into a mess that the star will forever be quick to crap on. If you're having a good time learning about actors who hate their own movies, well, hit that subscribe button down below and you'll get more of these videos coming into your life. Number 5, Dakota Johnson won't make a movie like Madam Web again. Without doubt, one of the biggest big screen failures of 2024, the people involved with making it even struggled to find anything positive to say about Madam Web. Containing terrible dialogue, dodgy special effects, and even being labelled the worst comic book movie yet. Sony's Spider-Man universe tale, centered around the titular superhero who can see into the future, earned largely negative reviews when it arrived in theaters. And that's something that didn't really surprise Cassie Webb herself, Dakota Johnson, as she'd tell Bustle in the wake of its release. Not only was she not surprised by critics and audiences' reaction to the awful movie, Johnson also felt she wouldn't do anything like Madam Web again because I don't make sense in that world, is how she put it. The fact that 50 Shades of Grey star would also admit that sometimes in this industry you sign on to something and it's one thing and then as you're making it, it becomes a completely different thing and you're like, wait, what? Suggests that the Madam Web fans eventually saw wasn't quite the one the actor had agreed to make when first signing on the dotted line. Now sure, Johnson didn't exactly enjoy being a part of a project that was so mercilessly blasted by viewers. However, her words of "but I can't say I don't understand" and comments on art not doing well when it's made by committee both hint at the star also not really liking what eventually swung into cinemas. Number 4, Charlize Theron said Reindeer Games was a bad movie. Like many of the names on this list, Charlize Theron has starred in some properly awesome pictures over the years, putting in some seriously impressive shifts in the likes of Mad Max Fury Road, Monster, and Bombshell. One movie that didn't really earn much praise from both critics or the star herself was 2000 action thriller Reindeer Games though. Playing Ashley Mercer in the John Frankenheimer dud, Theron would ultimately tell Esquire back in 2007 that although she fully accepted that they'd made a bad movie, she still got to work with the director of The Manchurian Candidate. In her mind, it didn't really matter that Reindeer Games sucked. All she cared about was getting to share a set with the person who directed the movie of all movies, in her words. So while Theron may hate what ultimately ended up on screen, it's safe to say she still cherishes the memories of working alongside one of the great filmmakers of the 20th century. Number 3, Elizabeth Taylor thought Butterfield 8 stinks. Similarly to Paul Newman back in the mid-50s, it didn't matter that Elizabeth Taylor earned herself an award for her performance in 1960s drama Butterfield 8, an Academy Award for Best Actress. She still detested the movie she starred in. Taylor actually didn't want to show up in that picture, and only agreed to make the movie to fulfill a contractual obligation to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer that would mean she could then leave to work with 20th Century Fox and make a film you may have heard of called Cleopatra, along with noting how it stinks after watching the Daniel Mann movie for the first time. It was later shown during the 2024 documentary Elizabeth Taylor: The Lost Tapes just how much she hated everything about Butterfield 8, with the star saying, "I hated it so much. I thought F them, they made me do the film. I didn't want to. I did it with a pistol at my head. The lines were so diabolical. It was such a piece of S-word. And it made me angry. And out of the anger, it kind of gave me an incentive. It was done out of anger." Even with all of that anger and frustration over playing call girl Gloria Wondrous in this film she was forced to do, the icon still managed to produce an Oscar-winning performance. Though she did actually note how she felt she only won the award because she'd ended up in hospital due to pneumonia around that time. As she put it, "I won the award for my tracheotomy. It must have been some kind of sympathy thing because the movie was so embarrassing, it's just dreadful." Number 2, Tom Hanks doesn't like some of his movies. Being one of the nicest men in all of Hollywood, it's hard to imagine Tom Hanks hating anything really. But according to the star of Toy Story, Forrest Gump, and so many other iconic movies, there are actually a number of films that he's made that he absolutely hates. Now, Hanks wouldn't go into detail and explain precisely which films fell into that terrible category when talking to The New Yorker, instead choosing to break down the 5 points of the Rubicon that are crossed by anybody who makes movies. But if one were to guess which sort of movie Hanks was thinking about when he said, "I have been in some movies that I hate," you could argue that The Bonfire of the Vanities is a strong contender. When asked in Oprah magazine back in 2001 whether he wished he'd said no to appearing in that film, he replied by saying only because it's one of the crappiest movies ever made. However, he would also admit that the movie taught him an important lesson, that he couldn't manufacture a core connection. Even one of the most successful and consistent actors of all time has a few movies he wishes were a bit better, folks. He's just largely keeping that list to himself like the nice guy he is, for now. And number 1, Tim Dillon thinks Joker Folie A Deux is the worst movie ever made. Joining Madam Web as one of the worst reviewed movies of the year, Joker Folie A Deux certainly provoked quite a reaction from viewers and critics all over the world, and even from one of the actors involved in making the divisive musical. Stand-up comedian Tim Dillon played a guard who asked Arthur Fleck to sign his book in the sequel to 2019's Joker tale, being seen inside of Arkham Asylum, the place Fleck is sent to after the events of that previous movie. Rather than shying away from commenting on Todd Phillips' box office flop though, Dillon openly admitted that he felt the movie was the worst film ever made when talking on the Joe Rogan Experience after it released. Telling Rogan he thought the movie had no plot, he even recalled sitting with his fellow guards on set and talking about how they had a feeling the movie was gonna bomb after seeing the musical picture up close. "It's not even hate-watchable, that's how terrible it is," was one of the ways Dillon described the end product. Yikes. Again, the movie received its fair share of negative reviews once it tap-danced into theaters, but you'll struggle to find any as scathing as the one unleashed on this podcast by one of Arkham's men in uniform.